It was already dark when the day began to slow down in front of the grocery store. The lights above the entrance buzzed softly, throwing pale yellow circles onto the cracked pavement. Cars came and went without pause. Doors opened, carts rattled, engines hummed, and people moved with the tired speed of those who had done this many times before. It was an ordinary evening, the kind no one remembers later. Nothing about it suggested that something meaningful was about to happen. Near the edge of the parking lot, close enough to the doors to be noticed but far enough to be ignored, a young woman stood quietly. She did not hold a sign. She did not block anyone's path. She did not raise her voice or wave her hands. She simply stood there, holding a small reusable bag in one hand and keeping the other tucked inside the sleeve of her worn jacket. Her shoulders were slightly hunched, not from the cold alone but from habit, as if she had learned to make herself smaller in places like this. Her jacket was thin, the kind that once fit better and now hung loosely. The zipper was broken halfway up, so she kept it closed by pressing the fabric together with her arm. Her shoes were clean but old, with soles worn smooth from too much walking. Her hair was pulled back in a low tie, not styled, just controlled enough to stay out of her face. There was nothing dramatic about her appearance. She did not look dangerous or desperate. She looked tired. People passed her without slowing down. Most did not even turn their heads. Some glanced for half a second, long enough to register her presence, then looked away quickly. A few tightened their grip on their bags or checked their phones, pretending to be busy. Others stepped slightly to the side, creating a wider path between themselves and her, as if distance alone could protect them from discomfort. She waited until someone made eye contact. She never interrupted conversations. She never chased anyone. When someone's eyes met hers, even briefly, she spoke in a soft voice that barely rose above the sound of the doors sliding open and shut. "Excuse me?" she would say. Sometimes people stopped for a second, more out of surprise than interest. When they did, she continued quickly, as if afraid of taking too much time. "I'm sorry to bother you," she said. "I don't need money. I just need milk. If you can help," and she waited. The words were simple. No long story. No emotional speech. No pressure. Just a request that seemed almost out of place in a world where most people asking for help asked for cash. Many did not believe her. Some shook their heads before she even finished speaking. Others frowned, confused by the request. A few laughed quietly, thinking it was a trick they had heard before. One person muttered something under their breath about scams and kept walking. Another said they were late and hurried away. Each response landed quietly on her. She did not argue. She did not follow. She nodded once, said thank you anyway, and waited for the next person. Time passed in small pieces. 10 minutes. 20. 30. The night air grew cooler, and the steady stream of shoppers thinned slightly. The store was still busy, but the rush had slowed. Employees stepped outside to collect carts. Pushing long lines of metal that clanged together as they moved, the woman shifted her weight from one foot to the other. Her hand tightened around the handle of the bag. Inside it was nothing but an empty plastic bottle, cleaned and saved just in case. She had learned not to waste anything, every few minutes. She stepped a little closer to the entrance, then back again, careful not to cross an invisible line. She knew that if she stood too close, someone might ask her to leave. If she stood too far, no one would hear her. She chose her moments carefully. A couple walked past her, talking about dinner plans. She did not interrupt. A group of teenagers laughed loudly as they exited, carrying snacks and drinks. She waited until they passed. An older man pushed a cart full of groceries, his eyes fixed straight ahead. She did not try. Then a woman carrying only a loaf of bread and a carton of eggs walked out. Their eyes met for a brief second. "Excuse me," the young woman said softly. "I'm sorry. I don't need money. I just need milk." "For my child?" The woman hesitated. Her face showed a flicker of something uncertainty. It'd be sympathy, but it faded quickly. "I can't," she said, almost apologetically. "I'm sorry." "It's okay," the young woman replied. "Thank you." The woman walked away, glancing back once before getting into her car. The young woman exhaled slowly. She did not cry. She had learned when crying did not help. She adjusted the strap of her bag and waited again. Inside her mind, she counted time not by minutes, but by chances. Each person was a chance. Each no was one less chance before the night ended. She thought about the small room she had left earlier that evening. The room was not really hers, just a space borrowed for now. A mattress on the floor, a single chair, a small window that faced another building. It smelled faintly of cleaning supplies and old paint. It was not home, but it was shelter. She thought about the child she had left there with a neighbor who had agreed to watch over them for a few hours. The neighbor had tried to help before, sharing food when possible. There was only so much anyone could do. The child had asked for milk earlier that day, not candy. Not toys, not something special, just milk. The last of it had been poured into a cup that morning. She had shaken the container, hoping somehow more would come out. It hadn't. She had smiled anyway, and said they would get more later. Later had come. She had checked her pockets before leaving. Nothing. No hidden bills. No forgotten coins. She had already sold what little could be sold. There was nothing left to trade. Asking for money felt heavy. It always led to questions she could not answer without shame. Milk was different. Milk felt honest. Milk felt necessary. She had practiced the words in her head before coming. Keep it short. Keep it calm. Do not explain unless asked. Do not beg. So she waited. Another person came out, this one carrying several bags. Their eyes met. "Excuse me," she began, before she could finish. The person waved a hand dismissively. "No," they said sharply. "Don't ask me." "I'm sorry," she replied automatically. The person was already walking away. The night deepened. The lights felt harsher against the darkness. A breeze moved through the lot, lifting bits of paper and leaves along the ground. She tucked her chin down slightly, bracing against the cold. She wondered how many times she could say the same words before they lost meaning. Each time felt like peeling back a layer of herself and holding it out for strangers to examine. Then someone new stepped into her line of sight. This person walked alone, hands empty, pace steady. Not rushing, not slow. Their posture was relaxed, but alert, as if they noticed their surroundings without trying to control them. They did not look at a phone. Their gaze moved naturally, taking in the parking lot, the carts. The people, when their eyes met hers, they did not look away. She felt it immediately, the difference. Not kindness yet, not help, just attention. "Excuse me," she said, her voice steady despite the long evening. "I'm sorry to bother you. I don't need money. I just need milk. If you can help." The person stopped. Not just slowed down, but fully stopped, turning toward her. Their expression did not harden. It did not soften into pity either. It stayed open, curious, serious. "Milk." They repeated, "Yes," she said quickly. "Just milk." There was a pause. The sliding doors behind them opened and closed, letting out a rush of warm air and sound. A cart rolled past. "For your child?" The person asked. She nodded. "Yes." Another pause. Most people used pauses to think of excuses. This pause felt different. It felt like consideration. "I can buy it," the person said. The words did not register at first. She had heard many versions of help that turned into something else. Promises that faded. Offers that came with conditions. "You don't have to," she said automatically. "I know," the person replied. "But I can." They gestured toward the store. "Come on." Our feet stayed planted for a second. Her heart beat faster, not with excitement, but caution. She had learned to be careful. "I only need one," she said. "The cheapest is fine." "That's okay," the person said. "Let's go," she followed, keeping a small distance, ready to stop if needed. Inside the store, the light was brighter, the air warmer. The smell of bread and cleaning products mixed together. They walked toward the dairy section. She kept her eyes low, focusing on the floor tiles, counting steps. When they reached the shelf, she pointed without hesitation. "That one," she said. "It lasts longer." It was the simplest option. No brand name. No extras. The person picked it up and placed it in their basket. "Is this enough?" they asked. "Yes," she said. "Thank you." At the checkout, she stood to the side, hands clasped together. She watched the cartons slide across the scanner. The sound of the beep felt louder than it should have when it was paid for. The person handed her the bag. "There you go," they said. She took it carefully, as if it might disappear. "Thank you," she said. The words felt small compared to what they carried. The person nodded, then paused. "Are you okay getting home?" they asked. "Yes," she said. "It's not far." Another pause. "Take care," the person said. "You too." She replied. They walked away. She stood there for a moment, holding the bag. The weight of it was light, but it felt heavy with meaning. She had come for milk, and she had it. As she stepped back into the night, she did not know that this moment, quiet and unnoticed by most, would soon travel far beyond this parking lot. She did not know that the simple request she had made, and the simple answer she had received, would begin something much larger than either of them. For now, all she knew was that her child would have milk tonight, and that was enough. The walk back from the store felt different from the walk there. The parking lot was the same, the lights still buzzing, the cars still moving in and out, but something inside her had shifted. She held the small bag close to her chest, not because it was heavy, but because it mattered. Each step felt steadier, less rushed. For the first time that day, she was not counting what she lacked, only what she had. She kept replaying the moment in her mind. The pause. The question. The simple decision to help without turning it into something uncomfortable or embarrassing. She had not been asked to explain herself. She had not been tested or judged. Someone had listened, believed her, and acted. That alone felt rare. As she walked, she passed familiar streets. These were not places she had grown up, but places she had learned. She knew which sidewalks were cracked enough to trip on if you weren't careful. She knew which corners stayed lit and which ones went dark too early. She knew which houses had barking dogs and which windows stayed open, even in the cold. She adjusted her grip on the bag. When a breeze picked up, the night air pressed against her face, sharp but clean. Her breath came out in small clouds. With every few steps, she glanced down, just to make sure the carton was still there, still real. Her thoughts drifted to the child waiting for her. She imagined the look that would come when she walked through the door. Not excitement exactly, more like relief. The kind of relief that comes when a promise is quietly kept. She remembered promising earlier that day. She had said it with a calm voice, even though she had not known how she would manage it. Promises had become something she handled carefully. She only made the ones she believed she could keep. Tonight, she had kept one. When she reached the building, she slowed. It was old, with peeling paint and stairs that creaked no matter how lightly you stepped. The hallway smelled like dust and old cooking oil. The light near the entrance flickered. Always threatening to go out completely, she climbed the stairs quietly, counting them without thinking. At the door, she paused, listening. Inside, she could hear soft movement, the sound of a small voice humming to itself, the neighbor murmuring gently. She knocked lightly. The door opened almost at once. "There you are," the neighbor said, smiling with tired eyes. "I was starting to wonder." "I'm sorry," she replied. It took a little longer. Her gaze dropped to the bag. "You got it?" the neighbor asked. She nodded and lifted the bag slightly. "That's good," the neighbor said, stepping aside. "They've been asking." Inside, the room was warm but dim. A single lamp cast a soft glow. The child sat on the mattress, legs tucked in, eyes bright despite the late hour. "You came back," the child said. "Yes," she replied, forcing a smile she didn't have to fake this time. "I told you I would." She set the bag down carefully and took out the carton. The child watched closely, as if afraid it might vanish. "Milk?" the child asked. "Yes," she said. "Milk." She poured a small amount into a cup, careful not to spill a drop. The child took it with both hands and drank slowly, like it was something special. She sat nearby, watching. Each swallow eased something tight in her chest. Later, after the child had settled and the neighbor had gone home, she lay back on the mattress and stared at the ceiling. The room was quiet now. Too quiet for sleep to come easily. Her mind returned to the person at the store. Not their face exactly, but the way they had listened. The way they had stopped. She wondered what made someone do that. On the other side of town, the person who had bought the milk was driving home. The traffic was lighter now, the road stretching ahead under steady streetlights. They replayed the encounter too, though for different reasons. They had not planned to stop at that store. It had been a last-minute decision, a quick errand added to a long day. They had seen many people asking for help before, in cities and small towns, outside stores, and at intersections. Over time, it became easier to walk past, to assume stories were exaggerated, to protect oneself from feeling too much. But this had felt different, not because of desperation. Because of restraint, as they drove, they thought about the words she had used. Not money, just milk. The simplicity of it stayed with them. They wondered how many people had walked past her without hearing what she actually said at home. They set their keys down and sat in silence longer than usual. The house felt too large for the quiet it held. They thought about how easily the situation could have been reversed. A few wrong turns, a bit of bad luck. Sleep did not come easily for them either. The next morning, the woman woke early. The child was still asleep, breathing slow and steady. She moved carefully, trying not to wake them. She poured the remaining milk into a cup and placed it within reach. She looked at the carton, calculating. It would last a little while if she was careful. She could stretch it. She sat at the small table and tried to plan the day. Planning had become a habit, even when plans often fell apart. She listed what she needed to do, what she needed to avoid. She needed work. Any work she needed stability, but most of all, she needed to keep going. Later that day, she returned to the grocery store not to ask, but to look. She checked the board near the entrance where small notices were sometimes posted. Cleaning jobs. Temporary shifts. Nothing new. She did not stand in the parking lot this time. She did not ask anyone for anything. She simply walked past the spot where she had stood. The night before, it felt strange to see it empty. Days passed. The milk ran out slowly, exactly as she had planned. Each pour felt measured, careful. She found small ways to manage. A little help here, a little there. Nothing big enough to change everything then. Something unexpected happened. The neighbor mentioned seeing a short post online. A story shared by someone who said they had met a woman outside a store who asked for milk instead of money. She didn't say where, the neighbor said. But it sounded like you. Her heart skipped. She didn't use names, the neighbor continued. Just talked about how it made them think. She felt a mix of fear and confusion. Did they show anything? She asked. No, the neighbor said. No pictures. Just words. That night she lay awake again, listening to the sounds of the building. She wondered if the story would fade like so many others. She hoped it would. She did not want attention. She did not want pity. She just wanted to live. What she did not know was that the words were already moving. Being shared quietly at first, then faster. People recognized something in them. Not the situation exactly, but the honesty. Across phones and screens. Strangers read about a woman who asked for milk. Not money, and paused. And slowly, without anyone planning it, something began to grow. She noticed small changes first. A message from a local group offering information. A suggestion about a job opening. A donated bag of groceries left with the neighbor. No note attached. She accepted what she could, carefully, always wary of strings attached. Still, she did not connect it fully to that night. She told herself it was coincidence. It was easier that way. One afternoon, as she sat by the window watching the street below, her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. It was brief, polite. It said they had read a story and wondered if she might be the person in it. It offered help, no pressure. She stared at the screen for a long time. She thought about the milk, the pause, the kindness that had not asked for anything in return. Finally, she typed a short reply. Yes, she wrote. That was me. And in that moment, though she could not see it yet, the quiet choice made in a grocery store parking lot took another step forward, moving from a single act into something that would soon reach far beyond her small room, changing more than just one life. The days that followed did not change all at once. There was no sudden turn where everything became easy. Life continued in the same small steps it always had, slow and careful, shaped by limits. Yet something unseen had started to move, and even though she could not fully name it, she felt it in the way mornings no longer began with the same heavy fear. She woke early most days, before the building stirred. The child slept beside her, wrapped in a thin blanket, breathing softly. She often lay still for a few minutes, listening, letting herself feel that quiet. Silence used to make her anxious, because it left too much space for worry. Now, it felt different. It felt like a pause instead of a warning. She made breakfast from whatever she had. Sometimes it was just toast. Sometimes nothing more than warm water and patience. She learned to stretch things in ways that surprised even her. A little food became 2 meals. A single good day carried her through 3 hard ones. She kept her phone close. Not because it rang often, but because when it did, it mattered. After the message she had sent, saying only that the story was hers, she waited. Waiting had always been part of her life. Waiting for calls that never came. Waiting for answers that arrived too late. Waiting for luck that seemed to visit everyone else first. This waiting felt heavier. She checked the phone, then set it down, then picked it up again. The child watched her with curious eyes. "Are we going somewhere?" the child asked once. "Not today," she replied, brushing hair away from the child's face. "Maybe soon." She did not know if that was true, but she said it anyway. Later that day, the phone buzzed. The message was careful. It did not rush. It said the person had shared the story without details because they believed privacy mattered. It said people had responded strongly. It said help had been offered, but only if she wanted it. No pressure. No demands. She read it 3 times. Her first feeling was fear. Attention had never brought good things before. It usually brought judgment, questions, expectations she could not meet. She worried about being seen, really seen, misunderstood. She thought about ignoring it, but then she thought about the milk. How small that moment had been. How safe it had felt. She typed slowly, choosing each word. "I don't want my face shared," she wrote. "I don't want my child involved. I just need stability." The reply came later. "That's respected," it said. No photos. No names. Just support. She held the phone in both hands. Her fingers trembled slightly. "What kind of support?" she asked. The answer was long but gentle. "Help finding work. Temporary housing assistance. Medical support for the child if needed. Nothing public unless she agreed." She leaned back against the wall and closed her eyes. She had learned not to trust easily. Promises had broken before, but something about the way the words were written felt different. There was no rush to save her, no tone of control. She said yes, not to everything, just to talking. Over the next week, she spoke to people she had never met. Voices on the phone that asked questions without digging into her dignity. They listened more than they spoke. When she hesitated, they waited. She told her story in pieces, not all at once. Some parts were too heavy to lift quickly. They did not interrupt. The child sensed the change before she did. There was more movement, more conversation. The neighbor noticed too. "You sound lighter," the neighbor said one evening. "I feel careful," she replied, "but hopeful." The neighbor nodded. "That's enough to start." Across town, the person who had bought the milk followed everything quietly. They did not step forward. They did not attach their name. They watched as others offered help and stepped back when it was not needed. They remembered her face often. Not the details, but the calm strength beneath exhaustion. The way she had chosen the cheapest milk? Without being asked, they thought about how many times. They had walked past people like her before. Work. Continued. Meetings. Responsibilities. But the memory stayed close. One afternoon, she was invited to meet someone in person. Neutral place. Public safe. She hesitated, then agreed. The meeting was simple. No cameras. No paperwork spread across tables. Just conversation. They asked what she wanted most. She surprised herself by answering without hesitation. A chance. Not charity. A chance to stand on my own, I nodded. The first step came quietly. Temporary housing that did not feel borrowed. A small place, clean and steady. The day she moved in, she sat on the floor for a long time, breathing. The child ran from room to room, laughing. "Is this ours?" the child asked. "For now," she said. Yes, she unpacked slowly. She did not have much, but she arranged what she had with care. A sense of order mattered. Work came next. Not glamorous. Honest. Enough. The first paycheck felt unreal. She held it longer than necessary that night. She bought milk without asking. She stood in the same store, at the same shelf, holding the carton. For a moment, her hands shook. Then she placed it in her basket and moved on. She did not stand in the parking lot afterward. She went home. Online, the story continued to move. People shared it not as entertainment, but as a reminder. Comment sections filled with quiet reflections instead of arguments. Some wrote about times they had ignored someone. Others wrote about moments they had helped. She did not read much of it. She did not want to become an idea instead of a person. Weeks passed. Stability did not erase fear completely, but it softened it. She learned new routines. The child learned new rhythms. One evening, as she watched the child drink milk at the table, she thought about how small moments could change directions. She did not feel famous. She felt grateful. She also felt responsible. She began to help when she could, quietly sharing information. Watching children for neighbors, offering food without questions. She never told her story unless asked, and when she did, she always said the same thing. "I didn't ask for money," she said. "I asked for milk." She understood now why that mattered. Because sometimes, the smallest honest request is the hardest to ignore. And sometimes, the world listens, not all at once, not loudly, but enough to change a life. Life did not turn loud after things began to settle. It turned quiet in a different way. The kind of quiet that comes when fear no longer speaks first. The woman noticed it in small moments, the kind most people overlook. The way she no longer jumped when her phone buzzed. The way she could sit still without planning an escape in her head. The way sleep came without replaying every mistake she had ever made. Her days became shaped by routine instead of survival. She woke early, not because she had to, but because her body was used to it. She prepared simple meals. She walked the child to school without watching every corner. She went to work, did her tasks, and came home tired in a way that felt earned, not defeated. The child changed too. The restless questions softened. The constant checking to make sure she was still there slowly faded. Laughter came more easily now. The kind that filled rooms instead of testing them. One evening, while folding laundry, she found herself crying without warning. Not from sadness, but from release. She sat on the floor and let it pass, surprised by how long she had been holding her breath without knowing it. The story online continued its quiet movement. It no longer felt new, but it stayed alive. People shared it when conversations grew bitter. They shared it when news felt too heavy. It became a reminder passed from one stranger to another. She remained mostly invisible within it. That had been her request, and it was honored. No face, no voice. Just an idea shaped by truth. Sometimes messages came from people who said the story made them stop and help someone they might have ignored. She read those slowly, carefully. She never replied with long words. Just a simple thank you. One afternoon, She was asked if she would consider speaking privately to a small group working to help families in quiet ways. No cameras, no audience, just conversation. She thought about it for days. She worried about reopening wounds she had just learned to close. She worried about being reduced to a moment instead of a person. But she also thought about the parking lot, about how one pause had changed everything. She agreed. The room was plain. Folding chairs. Coffee that had been sitting too long. People who looked tired but present. She sat among them, hands folded in her lap, listening before speaking. When it was her turn, she did not tell the whole story. She told the part that mattered. "I asked for milk," she said, "because it was the truth." She talked about dignity, about how help feels different when it listens first, about how being believed can be more powerful than being rescued. No one interrupted. Afterward, a few people stayed back to thank her, not for the story, but for the reminder. She walked home that night feeling steady. At the store, she noticed someone standing near the entrance, not asking loudly, just watching people pass. The sight stirred something deep in her chest. She slowed. She remembered how heavy that first step had felt, how invisible she had believed herself to be. She approached gently. "Hi," she said. "Are you okay?" The person looked up, startled, then nodded slowly. She did not offer money. She did not ask questions. "There's a place nearby that helps," she said. "If you want, I can walk with you." The person hesitated, then agreed. They walked together under the streetlights, two strangers sharing quiet steps. That night, as she tucked the child into bed, she felt the circle begin to close. The milk in the fridge was half full. Enough for tomorrow. Enough for choice. She sat at the table and wrote a list. Not of needs, but of intentions. Simple things. Stay present. Help when able. Ask honestly. She understood now that the world did not change all at once. It changed one decision at a time, and sometimes it began with something as small as milk. The future did not arrive all at once. It came quietly, the same way help had come that night in the parking lot. It came through ordinary mornings and unremarkable evenings. It came through choices that no one applauded and efforts no one filmed, and yet it stayed. The woman learned that stability was not a finish line. It was a practice, something that had to be protected with patience and honesty. Some days were easier than others. Some days old fears returned without warning, but they no longer controlled her steps. She woke each morning knowing where she would sleep that night. That simple certainty changed everything. The child grew into routines that felt normal. School days, homework at the table, milk poured without measuring fear. Sometimes the child would look up while drinking and smile, as if remembering something important but unnamed. She noticed that smile every time. Work became steadier. She learned new skills. She made mistakes and corrected them. She earned trust slowly, the only way that felt real. When she received her first full-time offer, she sat alone for a long time after reading it, letting the words settle. She did not celebrate loudly. She made dinner. She tucked the child into bed. She stood by the window and watched the lights outside, feeling something close to peace. The story online eventually slowed, as all stories do. It did not disappear, but it stopped being shared daily. It became something people returned to when they needed a reminder. She liked that. She never wanted it to become noise. Once in a while, someone recognized her from the quiet details she shared. When that happened, she kept the conversation short. She did not deny it. She did not confirm it loudly. "Yes," she would say. That was a hard time, and she would change the subject. The person who had bought the milk never stepped forward publicly. They never needed credit. Knowing had been enough. Watching a life stabilize without interference felt like the right ending. Sometimes, while passing a grocery store, they slowed near the entrance. They watched people walk in and out. They wondered how many quiet stories moved past unnoticed every day. They no longer walked past so quickly. One evening, years later, the woman stood in the same store, older now, steadier. She pushed a cart filled with ordinary things: bread, fruit, milk. She paused near the dairy shelf longer than necessary. Not from sadness. From gratitude, the memory no longer hurt. It grounded her. At home, she poured milk into 2 cups. One for the child, now taller, more confident. One for herself. They sat together at the table. "Do you remember when we didn't have milk?" the child asked suddenly. She nodded. "I remember. Why didn't you ask for money?" the child asked. She thought for a moment. "Because milk was the truth," she said. "And the truth is easier to carry." The child considered this, then nodded. Later that night, after the dishes were done and the house was quiet, she sat alone and reflected. Not on what she had gained, but on what she had learned. That asking honestly is brave, that listening is powerful, that help does not have to be loud to be life-changing. She understood. Now that the world is shaped less by grand gestures and more by small pauses, moments when someone chooses to stop instead of pass by, the night she asked for milk never left her. It became part of her foundation, a reminder of who she was and who she chose to become. And somewhere, every day, someone else stands quietly, holding a simple need, waiting to be seen. Sometimes, the world answers, and when it does, everything changes. The years continued to move forward in their quiet way. Nothing dramatic announced the passing of time. It showed itself in small changes that only became clear when she paused long enough to notice them. The child grew taller, shoes wearing out faster than before. The apartment gathered marks of living, faint scratches on the table, a stain on the carpet that would not come out no matter how many times she tried. These were signs of a life being used, not merely endured. She learned that peace did not mean the absence of problems. Bills still arrived. Days still went wrong. There were still nights when sleep came slowly, but the fear that once lived at the center of her chest had moved to the edges. It no longer made decisions for her. She woke each morning with a sense of direction, even when the path was unclear. She prepared breakfast without counting every bite. She walked out the door without scanning the street for danger. She carried herself differently now, not taller exactly, but steadier, as if she trusted the ground beneath her feet. At work, she became known as someone reliable. Not the loudest voice in the room, not the one who demanded attention, but the one who noticed details others missed. She arrived on time. She stayed focused. When mistakes happened, she owned them and fixed them. Over time, people began to lean on her without realizing when that shift had occurred. She did not talk much about her past. When questions came, she answered simply. She did not want to be defined by what she had survived. She wanted to be known for what she could do now. The child sensed this strength and mirrored it in small ways. Confidence grew where fear once lived. School became a place of curiosity instead of anxiety. The child began to ask questions not rooted in worry, but in wonder. One afternoon, the child came home excited about a school project. They were asked to write about a moment that mattered. "Can I write about the milk?" the child asked. She paused. "Only if you want to," she said, "and only what feels right." The child nodded, thoughtful. "I want to write about how you didn't give up." Her throat tightened, but she smiled. "That sounds good." That evening, as she watched the child write at the table, she reflected on how far they had come, not just in distance, but in feeling. She remembered the nights when hope felt like something borrowed, something that could be taken back at any moment. Now, hope felt earned. From time to time, she returned to that grocery store. Not intentionally at first. It simply remained the closest one. Each visit carried a quiet awareness, memory that stayed gentle instead of sharp. One evening, while waiting in line, she noticed a woman standing near the entrance. The posture was familiar. The way the shoulders curved inward, the careful distance from the doors. The woman did not hold a sign. She did not speak loudly. She waited. The sight stopped her breath. She finished paying and walked out slowly. As she passed, the woman looked up. "Excuse me," the woman said softly. "I'm sorry to bother you. I don't need money. I just need bread." if you can help. For a moment, time folded in on itself. She remembered how it felt to say those words. How vulnerable they were. How easy it was for them to be ignored. She did not hesitate. "I can help," she said. They went inside together. The woman chose the simplest loaf, apologizing more than once. She waved it away gently. "No need," she said. "We all need help sometimes." When they parted, the woman thanked her again and again. She listened, then placed a hand lightly over the woman's arm. "Take care," she said. "You matter." Walking home, she felt something settle inside her. The circle had not just closed, it had widened. That night, she told the child about it. "I helped someone today," she said. The child looked up. "Like the milk?" "Yes," she replied. "Like the milk." The child smiled, proud. "I want to help people too." "You will," she said. In your own way, over time, helping became part of her life, not as a mission, but as a habit. She shared information. She listened. She offered rides when she could. She learned that help did not always look like solutions. Sometimes it looked like presence. She was careful not to burn herself out. She remembered what it felt like to have nothing left to give. Balance mattered. The story of the milk never fully disappeared. Occasionally, someone would mention it in a quiet way. She learned to accept that it was part of her history without letting it define her future. One day, she received a message from someone who said they had been the person who stopped that night. The message was brief, respectful. It did not ask for anything. "I just wanted to say I'm glad you're doing well," it said. She read it slowly, heart steady. "Thank you," she replied. "You changed more than you know." There was no need to say more. Years passed. The child grew into a young person with opinions and dreams. Milk remained in the fridge, no longer a symbol of fear, but of continuity. Some days, she caught herself smiling when she poured it. She understood now that life does not always change because of big plans. Sometimes it changes because someone listens when it would be easier not to. She never forgot what it felt like to stand in that parking lot, asking for something small and necessary. That memory kept her grounded. It reminded her to stay honest with herself, to ask when she needed help, and to give when she could. On a quiet evening, long after the world had moved on from the story, she sat at the table with the child, now nearly grown. They talked about the future, about possibilities. "Do you think one small thing can really change everything?" the child asked. She considered the question. "Yes," she said. "I know it can." Outside, the streetlights flickered on. Inside, the room glowed with warmth. Milk sat in the fridge, waiting for tomorrow. The world remained imperfect. People still hurried past each other. Needs still went unseen. But somewhere, every day, someone stopped. And sometimes, it was enough. Time did not stop to notice what had already changed. It continued in its steady way, moving forward without asking anyone if they were ready. The woman learned to move with it, not ahead of it, not against it, but alongside it. She no longer felt like she was chasing life. She felt like she was walking with it, step by step. The child was no longer small enough to fit easily into her arms. Growth showed itself in quiet ways. Longer legs, a deeper voice, questions that reached further than before. Sometimes the questions were about school, about friends, about the future. Other times, they were about the past. "Were you scared back then?" The child asked one evening. She did not pretend she hadn't been. "Yes," she said. "Very scared. How did you keep going?" She thought about it carefully. "I didn't know how," she said. "I just did the next thing." That answer seemed to satisfy the child, who nodded slowly, absorbing it in their own way. The woman often thought about how easily a life could slip in a different direction. She saw it in people around her. Coworkers who struggled quietly, neighbors who smiled but carried heavy worries. She no longer assumed she knew anyone's full story. At work, she was asked to take on more responsibility, not because she demanded it, but because she earned it. She trained new people. She learned how to speak up without raising her voice. Confidence came not from pride, but from consistency. There were moments when old doubt returned. Moments when she felt she did not belong where she stood. When that happened, she remembered the parking lot, the cold air, the choice to ask for something simple. That memory reminded her that she had already faced her worst fear and survived it. The grocery store remained an ordinary place for most people. For her, it held quiet meaning. She never lingered too long, but she noticed things. Who rushed, who hesitated, who looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with the day. Sometimes she helped, sometimes she didn't. She learned that she could not save everyone, and that trying to do so would break the balance she had worked hard to build. But she never ignored someone just to avoid discomfort. The child grew into someone observant, someone who noticed when others were left out. One afternoon, the child came home upset about a classmate who had not eaten lunch. "What should I do?" the child asked. She did not give instructions. She asked a question instead. "What do you think would help?" the child thought.
I could share.
She smiled. "That sounds right." The next day, the child shared lunch. No announcement. No lesson. Just food passed quietly. That night, the woman felt something settled deeper inside her. The story had moved on, not as words online, but as behavior passed forward. Years earlier, she had been afraid of being seen. Now, she understood that being seen did not always mean being exposed. Sometimes it meant being understood by one person at the right time. The person who had once stopped for her continued their life too. They never forgot the moment, but they no longer held on to it tightly. It had become part of how they moved through the world. They listened longer. They paused more often. They trusted small kindnesses. They never expected to hear from her again, and yet they did, once more, years later. Not with urgency, just a message. "I hope you're well," it said. She smiled when she read it. "We are," she replied. "Thank you for asking. Nothing more was needed." The world continued to be imperfect. People still struggled. Systems still failed. Kindness still went unnoticed more often than not. But the woman had learned something important. Life did not change because the world became fair. It changed because people made small choices that added up over time. One evening, a child, now nearly grown, stood in the kitchen and poured milk into a cup. They paused, looking at it thoughtfully. "You know," the child said, "milk still feels important." She laughed softly. "It is not just the milk," the child said. "What it meant?" She nodded. They sat together at the table, sharing a quiet moment. Outside, the sounds of the city carried on. Inside, there was warmth. She no longer wondered what might have happened if things had gone differently. She knew that question had no end. What mattered was where they were now. The parking lot still existed somewhere unchanged. People still walked past one another every day. Some noticed, some didn't, but she believed this now. Every honest request leaves a mark. Even if it is not answered the way we expect, even if it takes time, she had asked for milk, not money, and the world in its quiet way had answered, not with noise, not with promises, but with a pause. And that had been enough.